which maybe you already knew this, but I found it very surprising as I read into some of this history in preparing for tonight. And as you may know, too, historians are pretty darn sure that Jesus was not born in December, right? So why do we do it then, now? Why do we celebrate Christmas? I want to dig into this question for us tonight. And how did this holiday, this feast day, as Christians call them, they're the big party days or the feast days, good days to have. So how did this feast of Christmas begin? And more significantly, why did it begin? And why did Christians decide to celebrate Christmas on December 25th? And then finally, in all of this, what's the universal, bigger story that the day tells us? That it's here on December 25th. So I want us to just get curious about that together. Can we do that? Can we do that? Yes, thank you. I'm going to do it anyway, so thank you for saying yes. I know you're already thinking about Santa and worried about getting home, but it's all going to be good. So let's do this together. And then, of course, after we do some geeking out about some history and some biology and some anthropology, you better believe we're going to bring it back to what it means for us here and now in this place on this particular December 25th that we'll all wake up to in the morning. So as I get into this, you may already know some of this stuff. This was some new stuff that I heard that was energizing for me to hear. So if you do know this, just let it be like, oh, I'm cool, I already knew that stuff. And if you did already know it, maybe you should do the sermon next year. Just going to throw that out there. Yes. And I do want to cite my source. I've heard Alexander Shaia, S-H-A-I-A, speak quite a bit, and much of the historical stuff that I'll share is from him and his research and a book that he's soon to write. So that's where it's coming from. You ready? All right, so jump with me back to like the beginnings of Christianity after Jesus' death. So the first 5 centuries of Christianity, it's quite complex. So let me make a flow chart. No, there are many threads, and I'm really just going to simplify it and bring it down to like the core story about how Christianity developed the feast of Christmas, which again, shockingly to us, it doesn't happen until the 4th and 5th centuries. So why then, right? So during the 4th and 5th centuries, Christians move beyond the geographical region of the Mediterranean. They go to the north side of the Alps for the first time to this new people. New to them are the Celts. The Celts are not just the group that we associate with kind of like Great Britain over here, but the Celtic world went from Ireland all the way to Turkey, but did not come below the Alps. And the most important feast of their calendar year was the Winter Solstice. Can you imagine why? Because it's like cold and dark and freezing, right? Like that's like we're living that far north. I mean, we don't have it that bad, but so it's just living in the cold climate. They were absolutely dependent upon the sun. And by the winter solstice, they're running low on the stores of food from the fall harvest. And seasonal affect disorder, they may not have had a name for it, but I'm sure it was happening, right? Like this is happening for people. So they absolutely looked to the sun's rebirth at the winter solstice as central to just the shape of their lives. They didn't know the science behind it necessarily, but they knew that after a certain day, the sun would come back, right? They even believed that their spiritual practices they were related to that, so it helped draw the sun back out. So the Celtic culture was so driven, formed, patterned in the flow of the seasons as their lifeblood, deeply connected to the rhythms of the earth. So that's this people that they come to. So the Christians, they come out of the Mediterranean world, like longer days, a lot more sun. So that's what they're coming out of. But more importantly, they stayed with the Hebrew calendar, the Jewish calendar that had been their calendar. As they were Jewish people, they became Christian people. So that's the rhythm for them. It's a moon calendar. So that's like the feast of Easter had been established based on the patterns of the moon. That's why Easter, the date moves around, because when there's a full moon, like that changes. And it has to do with the first full moon after the March equinox. That is where Easter will fall. So these Christians come into this region with their lunar calendars, the rhythm that guides their years and their important days, and they're trying to speak to the Celtic world about God and about Jesus, and this group is just having none of it because they're not speaking the same language. For the Celts, what's going on in the earth and what's happening in the sky and in the water is absolutely essential and interconnected to their understanding of life and the practice of their faith. So the Celts couldn't understand the Christian experience with a theological concept about the birth of Jesus Christ. That didn't mean anything to them. They kept asking the question, okay, tell us how that happens like in the earth. How does that happen here? Where are the parallels, the connection? How is the story told in the rhythms of the seasons? And then Christians, so they responded with, okay, well, why don't you tell us about what you celebrate, what's important to you? And the Celts tell about the winter solstice. And the Jesus followers go, oh, we know that story. We know that story too, in what we think of as a deeper way. You are thinking of the rebirth of the sun, and we're thinking of the power that's even beyond that power that brings freshness and radiance to everything in the cosmos. A power that was born in the darkness, that the whole earth now resonates with. So a connection was made between the rebirth of the sun at the winter solstice and the birth of Jesus. This one who was described hundreds of years earlier as the light of the world, right? The one who has come to bring light in dark places. And so the feast of Christmas emerges as a celebration on winter solstice. It emerges out of the need to tell God's story in the midst of a new people as part of telling the story of what is born when out of the deepest dark of the year, the light begins to return. How God is reborn as the earth makes its turn into the days that finally lengthen again and the light begins to grow. Is this just not strikingly beautiful, right? Yet as we know, Christmas Day, December 25th, is not actually on winter solstice, right? Which is now December 21st or 22nd. So if all of this is the origin, the intention of Christmas, and from the Christian perspective, it should be paired with the light of the winter solstice, then when, how, why did that separation occur? Well, thank you for asking. So as they're developing the Feast of Christmas in the 4th and 5th centuries, as this is happening, they're under the Julian calendar. And people probably already know this stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. They were under okay, so this is all fascinating to me. So they're created by Julius Caesar in about 50 BCE. So that calendar only had 362 days in it. So 3 days short, right? Then fast forward to the 16th century. And December is now in the springtime. Because as you go through hundreds of years, you're missing 3 days. That slippage adds up, right? So, and you may know, Pope Gregory created the Gregorian calendar in the 16th century with its 365 days, well done, including the thrown-in leap day every now and then. So that we're on track. Like December stays in the winter. But now there's a problem with this new calendar. The winter solstice now falls on, it used to be December 25th, but now it's December 21st or 22nd. So with the winter solstice now 3 days before the Feast of Christmas, there was a great theological debate, right? Do we move the Feast of Christmas back to the solstice because what's going on in the sun and the earth, like that is important, it's connected? Or do we leave Christmas on the traditional day, the day it has been for almost 1,000 years on December 25th? Anyone have an idea of which one they chose? Anyone? So it's December 25th, but can you guess why? It's such a fabulous reason. So there's a clue. The decision was made to leave Christmas as 3 days after the solstice. 3 days. And what in Jesus' life do we think of when we hear 3 days? Resurrection. 3 days Jesus was dead and in the tomb. 3 days spanned the death of Good Friday to the light of resurrection on Sunday. 3 days. So that's one reason. The second reason, the other reason, has to do with the solstice and what it actually means, that word. So the word solstice actually means sun stand still. Sun stand still, because when the sun reaches the lowest point, if you look at the trajectory of, if you watch how the sun moves through the sky, on the shortest day of the year, it's the closest to the ground, that makes the difference, right? That longer days, shorter days, longer days, depending on the arc of the sun. And so when the sun reaches its lowest point in that daily arc across our sky, before it begins to move higher again in the sky, lengthening our days, it appears to pause, to stand still. So that actually on the day and night of the solstice, and for the 2 days after it, the sun seems to not move any higher for 3 days. On the third day after the winter solstice, the naked eye can for the first time begin to see light grow. And for that physical embodiment, the church said, this is even better. This is even better. It's even better that we don't have Christmas exactly on the day of the solstice. Christmas now, at least in the northern hemisphere, is that first moment that the naked eye can perceive that light is now growing again. This is why the 25th of December was not reunited with winter solstice, because Christmas morning is that first moment that the naked eye can perceive that light is now growing again. I mean, come on, people, right? So this Advent here at Salt House, without saying it this way, we've been growing toward this through the sermons and the practices that we've had and we've shared in our Advent journey. We've called it Christmas Present, trying to be people who are present in the moment, and how we do that because the present moment is where God is. The Jesus story invites us to live into the present moment. And we've named this month, too, how our minds hardly ever actually are present in the moment, that we just have this way of ping-ponging between replaying the past and worrying about the future. And Advent and Christmas, these last few weeks, I mean, hasn't that been our brains, right? Like, this season is particularly intense, the way we replay Christmas's past, and we're always thinking through all the things coming up, the shopping and the baking and the planning and the eating. But today, now, here, it's Christmas. And we sit here like in the afterglow of hearing the Christmas story again, a story that for most of us is very familiar, right? It's likely associated with memories of like picture books or Bible stories from when we were kids, or that one time we were the shepherd, or, it's associated with those things. Perhaps it's even so familiar that it's lost some of its meaning beyond just being kind of sentimental. So the work for us to do today, the beautiful invitation, is to let this story find us here and now, to be present actually here in this story. Yes, with Mary and Joseph at the manger, to see the light of the angel's glory as it fades while the shepherds take off for town, and more importantly, to hear the angel's words as true. That we'd really believe that this day there is great and joyful news for all people, no matter what box they would check or affiliations they have or labels we or they would give them, all people. But here's the real challenge. It even includes us. So my friends, thank you for letting me geek out about some of the history of why Christmas is on December 25th. So cool, right? I hope that you hung in for that, because we hear in this just such a powerful message, because we're here on Christmas where good news of great joy is happening for us. For today is again the first moment that our eyes can perceive that light is now growing again, which meets us at a deeper level than just our calendar, right? Christmas teaches us that we can know that every time in our life, our personal life, our community life, and our family life, and in our country's life, when we go to the deepest dark, any of those times, that's where the grace of the fresh radiance will come. Which begs of us then the question, where in our lives do we have the deepest dark? This is my question for us this Christmas. And it ain't rhetorical. Where in your life, where in your spirit, in your body, in a relationship, where is it winter solstice and the sun seems unmoving? Whether our personal life, our community, our family life, our country's life, our world's life, where is your deepest dark? We ask because Christmas teaches us that is where the grace of the fresh radiance will come. Christmas teaches us this because the Jesus story teaches us this, right? In innumerable ways. Jesus' life is a story of light beginning to grow again in places of deepest dark. And that story of Jesus begins here, where there isn't space in town except hanging out in the barn with the animals, on the farm, as Ellie said it so good. Where shepherds are chosen they're the ones who are chosen to be the first witnesses to Jesus' birth. Shepherds were like the lowest on the social ladder. They literally slept on the ground with their sheep, which is stinky business because poop, right? Just honestly. So shepherds stayed out of town because you could always smell when a shepherd was coming, which meant everyone knew who you were, that you were the lowest of the low. They lived in a place of deep dark within their society, right? These are the ones who are visited by the glory of angels and become the first to go to the manger. The Jesus story is one where light comes to shine in the deepest dark. And we all have deepest dark. The deep dark of grief, whether we've lost someone recently or a while ago. Christmas sure reminds us of those whom are absent. There's also the grief of broken relationships, whether broken through divorce, through hurt that has caused schisms in our families, through betrayal, or the grief that we carry for the ways and just all the ways in which our life may not be the way we thought it would be right now, right? Whether we thought we'd be married now, or that having children would come easy, or that the challenges of our particular child, that, man, there just are times when it seems more than we can bear. Then there's the deep dark, too, of just all the ways in which we experience personal pain. Illness, job loss, financial issues, depression, anxiety, addiction, loneliness, abuse. And our dark, I was thinking about, like to say, what's your deepest dark? Feels like it has to be a really, really big deal. It's like, no, it can be a small thing, but it's just really dark. Something that we've lived through a long time ago. It could be something that's fresh this week. So what is your deep dark now? Here at Salt House, we always, when we gather, we have what we call our grief wall and our gratitude wall, little chicken wire situation over there. The grief wall is our smaller version of the wailing wall that's in Jerusalem, a place to come to and bring the things that we cry out about. But the gratitude wall is just there because, come on, we all just need a wall where gratitude can go, so that's there. But this Christmas, in this present moment, I invite you to be Christmas present by being present to your deep dark and to name it. Through Advent, we've named and brought forward our prayers of hope and of peace and of joy and of love. And we literally have brought those things forward around our Advent candles. And tonight, we get to bring our deep dark too. You should have a piece of paper that you were given when you came in. And if not, there are plenty more over here by the grief wall. You're invited to name and write down what it is that you're carrying, that you want to name that's hard, the thing that's poking you recently, whatever that thing is. In a few minutes, you're invited to come up as we come through Holy Communion, to go and clip that up on the grief wall. And you may very well actually be in a place where you want to write down a word of gratitude. So if that's the space you're in, then do that. Awesome. So do that, but please do that and put it on the board. But in a moment, then again, during communion or after worship, do take that intention to be present here and now, to name what it is that you carry and how this message of Jesus' birth is a message for you, for all of us here and now. And I want to name that, especially if you're a guest. You may be thinking, hey, thanks, Sarah, for ruining my Christmas jam with all this deep darkness talk. Thanks a lot. But I don't apologize for it because, well, that's the thing about Christmas and about the whole life of God. How we approach things here at Salt House, the way we go about it is we feel all the things. So we try to be people who walk towards the joy, but we also walk towards the suffering too, all that's there in our lives, knowing that Jesus invites us into a life. Brene Brown uses the word of wholeheartedness. We're people who feel wholehearted, who feel all the things. And we do it now because the promise is that the light is beginning to grow, right? Do not be afraid, for see, I'm bringing you good news of great joy for all the people. To you, to all of us, is born this day in the city of David a Savior who is the Messiah. The deepest dark is not the place where grace goes to die. Man, it feels like it when we're in it. But the deepest dark is the place where grace goes to be born. This is what we find at the manger. So my friends, tonight, as you go home, tomorrow in all of our celebrations with family, with friends, with presents, with stockings, and with pie. I love pie. In the midst of all the Christmassy goodness, we can hold the dark too. We can even speak about it with others. For friends, we stand together with Jesus, who is our Emmanuel, our God with us at this first moment, once again, when our eyes can perceive that light is now beginning to grow. So for all of this, we say Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
And we say thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
Indeed. So as the band comes back up, I just want us to take 1 minute to be quiet and to just listen to our lives and lean into the deep dark that we may be holding